This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. In each episode, we bring you information, insights, ideas, and interviews from some of the industry's top thought leaders. Head to mediasalesmastery.com to help pick the topic and guide the show.
This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. I'm your host, Jamie Wood. Our topic this fortnight is a little different from usual. I think I said a little while ago that I was going to start to mix up the format of these a little bit to keep them sort of interesting. And what I'm actually going to do this time is I'm going to feature 3 questions from you, the listening audience. Then what I'll do is I'll attempt to sort of tackle those questions and maybe provide some advice. Now, it's really important, big disclaimer here, I don't profess to be the expert on any of this. And for those people who listen regularly to the podcast, you'll note that I usually throw the listener question to my episode guests for them to address. With that being said, 11 plus years in media sales and sales leadership, it's probably fair to say that I've either personally experienced or witnessed most of these problems occur. So hopefully I can lend some advice for how I've tackled them in the past.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
The first question comes from Tamura in Wellington, New Zealand.
Kia ora, Jamie. I sell print, digital and radio products here in Wellington. Now it is a smaller market, but I've got a really good book of business already. Because my client base is so built up, I'm struggling to hit my weekly KPIs for face-to-face meetings. We're all required to hit 10 per week as a standard metric, and at the moment I'm getting about 5 to 7 on average. There's a combination of issues that my head of sales just is not accepting. The admin required in the role, the internal meetings I'm expected to attend, and just the day-to-day duties associated with managing my existing clients. Also, in a smaller market like Wellington, sometimes I think quality over quantity is the best approach. How do I tackle this with my sales manager, man?
Hey Tamura, thanks for the question. So I guess the first thing in reflecting on your question is we got to define the problem we're actually trying to solve here. I could take your question 2 ways. One is, do you want help managing your sales manager's expectations around how many appointments you can feasibly do in a week? Like, do you think that the KPI of 10 per week is just unachievable or probably a little bit of overkill? Or alternatively, do you want to find a way to actually do more meetings? So those 2 things in your mind, I think you're going to need to really decide, because that's going to ultimately govern the approach forward. For me, I would be leaning towards thinking about a way where you could potentially start to get those meeting numbers up. I take your point, Wellington being a smaller market and you already having quite a good existing book of business and needing to service and retain those clients. But ultimately, if you are going to drive your revenue and if you're going to future-proof your portfolio, you do need to have that focus on new business and constantly keep the top of that new revenue funnel filled up. So I think the first thing I would suggest you do is go back and look in your calendar, do a bit of a week in review, maybe over the last 4 weeks. Just have a look at where you're actually spending your time. I like to think of things in terms of high return or high leverage activities versus low return activities. So what are some things that maybe are appearing as a pattern in your calendar over 3 or 4 weeks that when you actually reflect on it, don't necessarily contribute to revenue, relationship, or retention of revenue? What are some things like, administrative tasks that maybe aren't particularly important or could or should be getting delegated to someone in the sales support team? To that point around internal meetings, there is a level of requirement to go to meetings, but what meetings potentially in hindsight did you not necessarily need to attend, or would your sales manager not be particularly upset if you apologize because you had a conflicting client meeting for? I think also probably just have a look across the board at things that should have been maybe delegated, things that could be automated. Are you doing things on a weekly basis that maybe just a focused hour at the end of every month you could knock over? And what are some things you can actually just delete entirely? I think that sort of retrograde analysis of those 4 weeks, at the very least, you'll start to be able to batch activities together and get an understanding of what things at least are starting to be those time thieves or those things that are stopping you from being able to do those meetings. From there, though, I think one of the suggestions I'd have is have a look 3 or 4 weeks in the future. So maybe you've got a blank calendar next month in the 3rd week of the month. see if you can actually fill it up with 10 meetings in a week. Fill up the bucket first and then figure out how to fit the rest into the week. I think you'll find very quickly that if you've got that baseline of 10 external meetings in the week, you'll be very, very good at being able to select what is and isn't a priority, rather than it kind of being the other way around at the moment, which seems to be that you're trying to squeeze it all in at the same time. I'd give that a go. I would then sort of sit down with the manager, show that you've done a bit of analysis, talk through, and I think you'll get to a place where hopefully you'll at least have a little bit more clarity as to what is a feasible and achievable number based on all the high return and high leverage activities you need to do.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
The next question comes from Callum, who is based in London.
Hey Jamie, have you done any podcast episodes on what to do when revenue is down long term? I've been selling digital media for 3 years now and have a pretty good strike rate of budgets up until about 5 months ago. I feel like when my percentage to budget is below 50%, I start to panic and don't really know what to do. I end up just feeling really confused about what my priorities are and jump around frantically doing short-term tactics that don't really impact revenue. What can I do to generate some quick revenue?
Thanks, Callum, for the question. Interesting that this is a topic you've asked if I've covered. No, there will be a future episode that I want to do around how to drum up quick business and how to get some quick revenue wins. Haven't quite formed it in my mind yet, but I think it's all going to be around how to generate new revenue and how to close pipeline. So watch this space for that one. In terms of looking at your question, I mean, revenue-related panic is pretty normal for everybody, mate. So I don't think you should be too hard on yourself there. It's been a tough market over the last 12 months all around the world. So the question I would probably first ask you is, and this might seem obvious, but just really spend some time thinking about it. What has changed? So, you need to diagnose why the revenue's down before you can address it. What has it been? Is it that your market activity's been down because you've been working from home and haven't been able to get out there and meet new prospects? Is it that your sales-related activity just hasn't been quite there? Have you been reacting to your existing clients, and servicing their needs, and are they maybe requiring more of you than they previously were? Is there something that's maybe been impacted, in your product? Has your audience proposition or your pricing proposition or something that you have in your product suite potentially being a little bit of a harder sell at the moment due to external factors? From there, once you've diagnosed that, then it's probably worthwhile having a think about what it is that you can do in response to that. I would also say that, when revenue's down and that revenue-related panic thing you're talking about, I totally hear you on sort of jumping around frantically, feeling like you've got a lack of focus, really getting quite short-term in your thinking and sort of getting to the end of a day not feeling like you've necessarily been able to move the dial on anything. So I would really recommend that you formulate what I call an ideal week. An ideal week is basically if you were to sit down, from Monday morning, first thing till Friday afternoon and work through a week in this fashion with these activities at these times, that'd be a pretty good week in your mind. It'd have a good mix of new business, good mix of external client-facing activities. It would leave you enough time to do your admin. It would leave you enough time to do things like eat lunch and to regenerate and revitalize your energy levels and feel like you can be motivated and in the right kind of headspace for the week. So sit down and do that exercise. Plan it out. Obviously, don't get too ambitious. A lot of people, they plan down to like the 15-minute intervals, which is really impractical. Don't try to squeeze too much in, but just have a think about what that week would look like. And then I think the next thing to do would be to formulate a bit of a plan that you just put on paper that's linked to that ideal week, and share that plan with your manager. Show what activities you're committing to, show how you're dividing your time up, show what it is that you intend to do over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then start to execute that plan just one day at a time. Just really come in. Don't focus on where the revenue's at for this week or this month. Don't focus on how much you put in today. Just really focus on every day coming in and really diligently executing against the plan and the ideal week that you put in place. I think you'll find really quickly that if you don't let the body shots distract you, if you don't let yourself get into a negative mindset, you'll start to see that coming in that way really removes a lot of the stress and anxiety. And at the very least, it keeps you focused predominantly on those revenue generating activities. A lot of it is actually just about that continuity and that consistency of doing that. So I wish you well, Callum. Feel free to let me know if that was helpful or if you wanted to unpack it further.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
Okay, and the final question is from Dallas, who is based in Sioux Falls, which I believe is in America in one of the Dakotas.
Hey, Jamie. Look, I got a question for you about client growth plans and how to build them. My sales manager uses the terms cross-selling and upselling all the time, and says that's the best way for me to drive revenue growth from existing accounts. I kind of know, what she means, but I'm a little embarrassed to ask her for more detail, or for examples on how to do this, because I've been in my job now for 3 years, and, I'd like to move into a sales management role. So I just don't like the idea of her thinking, I don't really know what this stuff is already. So is there any chance you can, talk more about this, maybe do an episode on the topic? That would be so awesome. I'm an account executive for a publishing house that focuses on the commercial property sector. So, would be great if you could provide relevant examples. Anyways, thank you so much. And, thanks for everything you do, pal. Love your show.
Hey, Dallas, thanks for the question. I'm actually not surprised you're a little confused by these terms, because I had to think about them a bit as well. The reason I think it's confusing is because cross-selling, as far as I know, is actually a form of upselling. So these aren't two completely different things. It's like, what's the difference between marketing and advertising? Advertising is part of marketing. So for ease of understanding, I guess the way I would explain it is upselling is finding a way to increase the client's spend level. So how do you get your average deal size up? Some of the things you can do to upsell a client might be offering incentives like a greater discount level for an increased budget commitment, adding more value in terms of bonus inventory in exchange for them giving you a larger share, a portion of their budget. So upselling, just think about it in terms of increasing your deal size. One of the easiest ways to upsell, which a lot of people don't think about, is just extending the time period that the client actually is in market with a campaign. So if they are looking to spend $5,000 to $10,000 a month, for example, and they normally spend on a 3-month interval, just encouraging them to commit to a 12-month contract and giving them a discount and an incentive to do so is actually a form of upselling. When it comes to cross-selling, this is where it gets a little bit more confusing, particularly in media sales, because cross-selling is about introducing complementary or ancillary products into your pitch with the client. So, you work in trade media. I actually really enjoy trade media. I find it really interesting. So I guess an example, in your space, if you were to upsell, would be to just extend their contract period or increase their budget spend. We know that that's a relatively easy tactic to deploy. But thinking about cross-selling, maybe they spend predominantly in your print title. That seems to be your hero product from what I understand. So could you go, look, it's a monthly publication we do. We have a pretty good coverage in the magazine in terms of some advertorial. We have some great full-page advertisements as well. But maybe you could cross-sell them some e-newsletter advertising in the 3 or 4 weeks after the publication, just to give the campaign some longevity. Perhaps you could cross-sell them some digital advertising on the website. So it ensures that they can keep their offer relevant and fresh in the market and have some continuity from the publication that you do in print. Maybe something as simple as going, hey, look, we've now got a podcast, which is an extension of our product suite. Maybe we should trial advertising a single product or a single service in your business in the podcast just to see how effective that particular medium is. So it's all about looking for those opportunities to get your clients spending across a greater mix of products or assets with you. One of the obvious benefits of this is that you are upselling, you're increasing their spend. Many media salespeople do fall into the trap of just taking a client's existing budget and spreading it across more assets and redividing it. So that's not ideal. What is ideal, though, is having a client invest across multiple products, because it makes the relationship a lot stickier with the client. It means that the client feels that they're getting value across a number of different areas. And let's face it, from a retention standpoint, if your client's investing across multiple different channels with your brand and getting some great results and really spending time crafting their messaging and crafting their campaign, it makes the the job of actually going to a competitor quite a difficult decision, because they've already invested so much time and energy in building out what it is that they do with you. So look, I wish you well on that, Dallas. Again, feel free to reach out and let's have a bit more of a chat on this one, because I'm happy to talk about doing a podcast episode in the future if this feels like it's something that we could unpack more.
Media Sales Mastery.
Okay, and that's the end of this one. A bit of a short, sharp one. Thanks for listening. This is actually the final episode of this particular season, but don't worry, I will be back from the first Sunday of August, and it'll be that regular fortnightly rhythm right through to the end of the year from this perspective. If you are a fan of the podcast, do drop me a line on LinkedIn. Let me know. Would love to hear any thoughts, any feedback, or any topics you'd like me to cover in the future. In the meantime, if you want to throw a thumbs up or a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, if you want to give us a review, if you want to share this with your friends, please do so. It's an independent podcast, something I'm really trying to get the word out there on. So until next time, happy selling. I'm Jamie Wood. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode.
You've been listening to Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. Head to MediaSalesMastery.com to help pick the topic, guide the show, and don't forget to subscribe to receive new episodes each week.